Well, here we are, back, another episode. Wow, I just sounded really negative. I just breathed like I was sad to be back. I'm not, but I am sad to be back in Massachusetts after being in Maine for 5 or 6 days, whatever it was that I was gone. It is just the best up there. I love it so much. The one thing that's missing is stripers for me. Now, hold on, everybody who's listening. Yes, there's tons of stripers in Maine. I'm not saying that. But where I was in Maine, Washington, and Hancock County, there are not that many stripers. There maybe were, there maybe aren't, there maybe are. But there's certainly not as many as there are from Portland South. And there certainly aren't as many as there are from, Boston South. And I'm really still on the hunt for them. And I haven't put in that much effort because I don't go for very long. But the thing that's so shocking to me, Toby, and I know you really like them, so I hope you get to experience sometime, but is the amount of herring. The amount of herring up there is mind-boggling. It is absolutely bonkers bananas. It's like almost undescribable in the context of what we're used to down here in the South, further south. Really, we should have them like that everywhere, I think, unfortunately. But, I take a cast out into a place with current, and I'll let people read between the lines about what I'm talking about. Take a cast, the lure touches the water, I'm instantly snagging herring, and then for the entire 100 yards back, it's just bumping and snagging herring the entire time. Can't even pull the lure through the water. And this isn't even like when the herring are coming in. I'm recording this in June. The herring are on their way out. So their populations are now smaller than they were going in. And in fact, when I was fishing for smallmouth in a couple of lakes, there were herring, even at a boat launch, this sandy boat launch, there were herring in the lake. I mean, I don't know how many by river, but we're 20 miles anyways in a straight line from the ocean. And they're swimming around in this lake. There are so many herring in the river anyways, even though that some of those aren't making it back out. It's just absolutely remarkable. It's crazy. It's wild.
Yeah, it makes you think like what it was like before Europeans started settling in the U.S. I think you and I had a conversation at one point, like every type of species that we see now that either is here, isn't here, shouldn't be here. Like those are the kind of things where, like, that's the direction my mind races. Like you're when you're first telling me this about that river, I'm thinking like, I wonder what, a couple hundred years ago, some of these little herring runs near my house were like, or what was like the Connecticut River like with herring, or what about salmon or sturgeon? Just, it's crazy to think all that stuff. But then there's stuff that's in there now that like technically shouldn't be there, that we kind of rely on. Like it's a totally different world we're living in right now than it was not that long ago. But it's cool to have a little piece, like a throwback little like piece of time that still exists like that up in Maine.
Yeah, and that's definitely what it feels like. It feels more frozen, like this is what it should be. The problem is there are not stripers. There are. I know people are going to be upset. And there are. I heard somebody, the uncle's brother, caught one in this river and that river and off this point, and they're in this town and that town. And I know. In fact, I was fishing the mouth of a river, and which is like a billion up there, and I'm sitting there watching what I think was actually brook trout blitzing in the saltwater at my feet at the mouth of this river. It was bizarre. This is crazy weird moment. There were herring, but there was these trout. It was wild. And a little guy in a whaler came by, and he said, you just missed them. And the Down East accent, which I may try to impersonate, but I'm not very good. And I'm like, oh, really? And he's like, yeah, they were just here. They were? What? And I had my fly rod, and he's like, yeah, caught a 10-pounder on a popper. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, keepers. They've been here the last week. And then he just kept motoring by in his whale, and I went, wait, he's talking about stripers. Like, there's stripers here. And then from that point, that sent a freaking fire in my heart, and I was like, that's it. I got to figure this out. But it's really far away, and whenever I go up there, I get very distracted by the hellacious smallmouth that are up there that are just out of control. It is unbelievable up there for smallmouth. So then I end up doing that the whole time I'm out there. But, Toby, this has nothing to do with what we had originally planned to talk about. Yeah. But I think it's interesting to you.
I can talk about that stuff all day. Just going on smallmouth and thoughts there. And, oh, yeah. We could easily go down 15 different rabbit holes.
The history you and I have talked about a lot. Because, even when I'm up there, I'm thinking to myself, this is what the coast should look like where we fish. Like, this is what it should be. Or even less people. Like, this is what it should feel like. And, of course, that ain't happening. That ship has sailed, for sure.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I latched onto when we interviewed Jimmy Fee, which he said in the episode that's already out now in his interview, he was talking about fishing the sand, and I asked him if he sort of walked and casted at little tiny spots, or if he like went and fished big spots. And one of the things he said that really stuck in my mind, and what we're going to talk about today, is the idea of burning water or burning spots. And that he walks by spots where there might be fish, there should be fish, there probably are fish, and he goes to the places that are more definitive, that there should really absolutely 100% be fish, or there should be big fish, or should be the highest concentrations of fish. And I was thinking about this, and the reason we're recording this now is because I was thinking about it a lot because I was fishing an amazing trout stream, which I will not name. Unbelievable, it's picturesque. And I was doing the same thing because I didn't know it. So I wasn't pulling apart every boulder and every little seam. I was looking for big pockets with corners and bigger boulders, that kind of thing. And I was being successful, but I was going by a whole bunch of different pieces of water. So I've done a lot of talking, a lot of introductions, so I'm going to let you start first. And my question for you is that, do you have the same approach, and is it different based on different spots, different kinds of spots? Do you burn water, or do you pick apart?
Yeah, when he said that, I think he said, like, I remember saying, when I'm on the rocks, I'm a barnacle, and then I forget what his comparison he made on the sand, but I was like, I hadn't really thought about it until he said it, but as soon as he said it, I'm like, I think I'm the same way. And the more I've thought about it since, on the rocky stretch, like, the barnacle might be the best description of what I do in that scenario. Like, I find my rock and I'm on it and I'm locked on it. Might move a little bit on certain ones, but the sand, I'm like super mobile. I'm going, moving, trying to find those better spots. Like, even, I don't fish the sand beaches as much as I would like to, just geographically. So when I go to the beach, I try to move. I'll pick like the sexiest structure, what I can read as like, this is where the fish should be, and that's where I concentrate. But different from the rock, if I'm on a rocky spot and I'm like, this is the spot they're going to be, I'm going to wait and they're going to come through. But if I do that on the sand and I find if there's nothing there, I'll give it a little bit longer than I would a non-productive looking spot, but I'm quick to move. I'm hopping, moving along, and I'll march. I'll start going and I'll set, like, I'll see some sort of a landmark in the distance, and I'm not stopping until I get there. Sometimes I'll take a cast in between, if something catches my eye. But I definitely am all about covering distance on the sand, trying to track down the most visually productive looking spot until I find something. Like, I'm talking when I'm in the hunt time frame still of a session.
So one of my questions for you is, you said in the rocks, you mean big boulder fields, do you or don't you?
Yeah, boulder fields, like, totally different approach on the boulder field stretches of beaches versus like the open sand beaches.
Now, here's the question you may or may not be able to answer, but it just has me thinking because, I feel the same way about the boulders, but I don't want to talk. I've already talked a lot, but my question for you is, what if you don't have big boulders? What if it's like a rocky shoreline that's maybe a little bit more like a flat, and maybe there's current or something? I can't actually even picture a spot in my mind because I don't have anything quite like this, but do you have anything like that, and do you approach it the same way, or do you move around more?
That I would approach similar to the sand beaches. And I actually, as you were saying, I immediately thought of a couple of places. And I can even say, in this case, because it's an island, when I'm on Block Island.
Oh.
Okay. Because there are stretches there that I've found that it's sort of like you're saying, where it's rocky, kind of featureless over the short run, but then so similar to like the sand beaches, if you just look at it from a distance, it doesn't look like a whole lot, so I'll cover the ground, but when there's something that sort of stands out, that changes it, that's when I lock in. So I guess it would probably be, for a better description, I think what you're getting at is my sand beach and my smaller rocky stretches are very similar, but the bigger rockier locations is where I lock down like the barnacle connection there.
So when I'm fishing when I'm, mobile on the sand, because I'm sort of the same way, I'm not necessarily trying to find the best piece of structure on a mile or 2 mile or a 10 mile. I'm trying to find a piece of good structure where there's fish. I believe that the fish are moving around. Maybe they're not like constantly swimming, but they're moving around different places. Is that what you're doing, or are you sort of looking for the very best piece of structure?
When I'm on the hunt, when I'm still searching, I'm initially looking for the best. Like, that's where I start. If I'm a fictional beach, I walk down and it's kind of not too much, and there's a soft piece of structure. Maybe it appears there's something. I might give it one cast. But let's just say I continue along for another 300 yards, and now there's something bigger. There's some whitewater breaking. Things start to look like this could be the best. Then I'm going to give it a few casts more. So I don't start really putting a lot of time into any given spot while I'm on the hunt. Unlike, the better it looks, the more effort I'm going to put in until I find something. If I found some sign of life on that little subtle one cast spot, I might give it a couple. But even in that case, if it's not producing a lot, if it's not producing size, the something to really hold me, I'm probably going to move along faster than a bigger, more pronounced piece of structure on the sand. And I don't know if that's just like something in there visually makes me just think there's more potential because it looks bigger. Like there's something going on in my head that's not there. Like it's not so much results based. It just it moves me to go. If it doesn't look great and it's not producing really, really, really well, maybe just around the corner that is. So I'm like, I don't move much on those big bouldery spots, but the sand type stuff, I always have this urge to keep going and looking for what could be better than that.
Yeah, and that's sort of what I was alluding to a little bit, I think, with my question, because I feel the same way. I fish the sand a lot more than you now, these days, like right now. And I think for me, I have been caught in the trap and have learned the hard way that this piece of structure that I'm standing on right here looks really good. That one over there also looks pretty good, but it's kind of the same. And it doesn't really look that much different. And also, I've walked down that way. You don't know where I'm saying, but I've walked down that way, and that piece of structure is pretty much the same too, but not really that much different. So I'm just going to stay here. The problem with that has been the fish randomly, and I'm air quoting for those who aren't watching, they randomly might be at that other spot over there that looks maybe slightly worse because something else happened earlier. The bait could have been washed in there when you didn't know it. There could have been, I don't know. There's a million. There may have been a couple of seals at this spot, and then they got pushed over there, and they just stuck over there because they have a pretty good advantage. There's a bowl over there too, and maybe this bowl's a little deeper and has a little bit more current, and maybe this trough has a little bit more of a cut to it than that one. Well, why are the fish over there and not here? I'm going to stay here because I'm going to camp out. Well, but the fish are over there because it's close enough, and that's the danger that comes from the sand beach for me, and why I end up walking so much, because there can be a lot of different structure that is comparable, and the fish are not totally spread out. There's not enough fish to fill in every single one of those little potholes, right? So for me, I'm always trying to think, okay, what's the concentration and density of fish? And I'm not going to sit there and cast at every single little tiny piece of water and do the Troxler thing where you pull apart every single, Rich Troxler, for people who don't know, excellent YouTube channel, great guy, great writer, you should go check him out. But he'll pull apart every single little tiny piece of wave and back of the wave and this wash and that wash. I'm not doing that, but I'm also holding out and saying, okay, just because this piece of structure looks like it's the best at this mile, there's also those couple over there that are almost as good or close to as good. I need to keep those honest. And the big thing, one of the other things that Jimmy said, and gets to what I'm saying right now, is he does the shuffle. I really liked hearing him say that, where he'll walk down 100 yards, fish something, and then come back. And he'll go the other way, and he'll go down and check out another spot. And then he'll come back, and maybe he'll stay in this one for 30 minutes, and then he'll go back over there again. Do you do that? Is that something you do in the sand at all?
If I'm, on that search mode still, if I did find a little piece of life, like my scenario where it doesn't look great, maybe I found a fish or two, but I moved on, I'll then, if I'm, coming back, I'll give it a check. It'll get in my mind only if I don't find better. If I don't sort of end the search mode And if I haven't gotten into like camp out mode on some fish, I'll start doing that. I'll go back and forth. I mean, I can remember one, basically that scenario last season on a sand beach where I ran into some fish and then kind of lost them. So then I moved past, and I came back and I checked it, and then I went past it because they weren't there, and then I came back a third time, and they were back there. So like there was something there, and perhaps my second time through I just missed them, because in my mind too, I envision the fish on the open sand beaches like moving through more, even with those smaller pieces of structure. Like it's kind of like maybe that builds into my psychological piece of why I'm locked in on the bigger structure pieces, is like it's more to hold them there for some time, whereas I like almost think it's like the scouts poke in on the little spots and they see if there's any food and they move off. But then when they find it, which you would think might usually be in those bigger structure pieces, that's when they all kind of converge. So I'm like, I'm looking for that type of a thing.
Yeah, I agree, and that's another factor in why I will pick out the top 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever number it is of pieces of structure and fish those, but also move between them and not get stuck on the very best. I was just thinking about it. In this particular situation with what we're talking about, because we're really focused on the sand, even more than I thought we were going to be when we started this conversation, but I want to pick out a few spots that are between B plus and A plus. I'm going to ignore everything that's less than B plus. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to treat things that are B plus to A plus kind of the same. And I'm going to move between them. This rip is really the best. It's the most, it's the deepest, it's the shallowest, it's the most whitewater, whatever it is. This one's the best. But those ones over there are also pretty good too, and those fish may be holding over there because of something that we didn't see earlier, or something that's happened that we don't understand, or there was a seal, or there was a shark, or there was smaller fish over there and they ended up there, or there was flounder and now they're keyed on, whatever it is. And so moving between those B plus, A minus spots and not just sitting on the A plus, I think is important. I think that's important, and it kind of gets back to what you're saying as well. Now, going back to the rocks for a second, though, because I'm the same way. When I'm fishing the boulder fields, unless I'm someplace like Block, Cuttyhunk, Montauk, etc., where I might move around a lot more because I'm usually traveling and I'm on a hunt, a little bit more of a hunt. Mm-hmm. Besides those places, I generally have a rock and I stand on it and I cast at a certain spot. Do you do that where you're standing on the rock and you're casting the same spot for a specific period of time? Or when you're on that rock, are there sub places that you're casting at?
It definitely, as I'm thinking, like prepping my answer to your question, I think, okay, each spot I've got like my primary, if we're going to put the grading, my A plus rock, my A minus, going down. And if somebody's on one of those, or if I'm with someone or one of them is producing, I work my way down. But when I get on them, I have really, really specific locations within it that I'm casting based on generally the tide stage. And like, I know that like when you and I fished, when you came and fished with me a couple of weeks ago, and I was saying, the short cast, like that little spot right in there, at this stage of the tide, that's where I'm putting it. And then once that kind of moves, like, develops through the tide changes, I might ignore it for the most part. I'll throw like a just in case cast from time to time, but now I'm targeting this other piece. And I definitely have that in a lot of my like more prominent rocky bouldery locations where my feet might be in the same place the entire stretch of the tide, but through the progression, I have certain pieces that I'm picking out that I've learned over time at that stage, not just like produce one fish. Like I'm not trying to replicate that one fish one time. Like 17 fish have come when I put my plug right there and swung it to right there.
Right.
Those are the ones that I'll put a bunch of casts back to back to back to back to back to back over that spot, taking different angles. Like we were talking in one of the episodes where I'm coming at it in different angles. I'm coming down at different depths, different speeds.
Joe was talking about that a lot.
Yeah, and with Dave Anderson, when we were talking with him on his plugs, the deep divers, and I work them through exactly that it's that point, that that little isolated piece that I'm trying to approach at a different angles through that little tide window. And if I go through that tide window, nothing happens, well, now I've got the next one. It might be a little down tide, up tide, wherever it is, based on each spot. But Yeah, I definitely, to go over to that sand side, I don't move as much, but it's not that I'm not moving where I'm fishing, I guess, on those,
Yeah, that's right. I think that a lot of emphasis is put on, what is one of the tips, I'm tongue tied. A lot of emphasis, and one of the top tips that, top level anglers will give beginners is that find a spot, own it, and fish it under every condition. And so the lesson there being that you don't know a spot until you fished it under every wind and tide and whatever. But I think something that often gets lost is the idea of what you're just saying. And it might be one of the most significant things to come out of this podcast today. And that's that when you're learning your spot, you're also constantly flexible and constantly hunting within that tide for those smaller patterns. So if you're standing on the same rock, even though you're standing there and casting in the same general direction, you might be swinging your plug from 3 to 2 for the first hour, and then 2 to 12 for the next 3, and then there's a spot at the end where you turn and you throw it from 10 to 9. This is assuming it's swinging like right to left, and that's all made up. But I think that is something that a lot of anglers when they're first starting out don't understand, that you don't want to just stand there in the same spot and cast the exact same spot. You can stand in the same spot and fish the same spot, but not cast at the same spot. And I honestly, we're talking a lot about you want to burn water, right? I think that's the way Jimmy put it. And you want to skip over places that look like they might be okay for places that are very, very productive. But I think also, as in the boulder specifically, and rips and maybe even estuaries might fit in here too, as you become more advanced, you sort of go backwards. And I found that in my career, again, I'm air quoting, in my career surf casting, where I would have burned water and gone to the obvious spots, in some of my spots and some of my spots that I've chosen intentionally for this, I've gone backwards and I'm starting to pull them apart and fish all those little sub spots. And I know, the Alberto thing of like, for this 15 minutes, I'm going to fish this. And for these next 30 minutes, I'm going to fish that. And for this next 45 minutes, there's this. And one of my favorite spots, it has a tide that has 4 different sections, at least, even when I'm casting almost in the general direction, where I need to approach it differently because it changes so much. And so I think you're almost going backwards, right? Because we're like, well, just toss it in the rip seam, and, what are you wasting all your time with the friggin' little whirlpool over there? But at some point, you almost go back to that. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is that true for you? I mean, that's what you're saying.
Yeah, no, it certainly isn't. Like I just say, I'm thinking maybe a piece of why my sand beach kind of approach differs the way I've explained it to my like hard, big structure Rocky is sort of on the sand beach, sort of 2 things. On the sand, the structure is always changing.
That's right. That's
week
right.
to week, month to month, season to season.
Yes.
So it's never the same, even if you're on it. And on top of that, to make things worse for a productivity level, I'm not doing it all the time. Like my sand beach excursions I do that less than I spring schoolie hunt on an average season. So I'm not getting that real hard feel for what's going on. So I'm almost like starting my fresh approach. It's like that. It's like I never fished that beach before. I might have an idea that there's generally something, around the corner from where I access the sand beach. I can look down and I see the shoreline start to bend away, 3/4 mile down. So I know usually there's something there. So I'll kind of go to that. But on the rocks, I've been able to build up over time that because it's consistent. I mean, aside from this winter where some of my rocky spots actually changed from the storms we had, for the most part, they're the same. So I'm not moving as much because I kind of have a good feel of where those better spots, those A plus spots are. So that's where I'm targeting. But even with that, like you said, I absolutely from time to time will start to rework those spots, generally on purpose. But like in our May recap, when I was saying like I screwed up a tide at a spot.
That's right.
So I inadvertently tried something totally different. Granted, it was tidally, affected that I was looking at, but I tried to do that nonetheless at some of my spots. Like once I get to know them really well, I try to relearn them again and look at those smaller pieces, those things that I didn't think were the A pluses. Like maybe that C minus. Let's see if there's a way to make that a B plus spot.
Well, and that gets to a whole nother layer of once you have an A plus that's for a certain period of time or a certain stage or whatever, then you start going, okay, where else can I find an A plus now for the time period, the conditions, the whatever time of year where that doesn't work. That A plus is no longer an A plus, it's an F. Mm-hmm. I have to find now an A plus that fills in those other areas. And that's where you get into the portfolio of spots and the different conditions. But I think one of the big takeaways from this is, as we've done this today, and I think about it, is that if you're starting out, if you're on the hunt, if you're someone listening to this who's on the hunt, and not just on the sand, but in your career, you're earlier on, I'm using your words, Toby, the hunt, then you should be burning a lot of water. If you're not so much on the hunt, then maybe you need to go back and start to pull some things apart and reevaluate and not get stuck on that same old pattern that you've been doing the same way over and over and over for the last 35 years.
And even if it's producing, I mean, that's one thing I learn over and over, season after season, is that I absolutely do not know everything about all of my spots.
Yeah, we've definitely picked one of the hardest kinds of fishing. That's for sure. It's hard. This has been a weekly edition of the Surfcast Podcast. You can find out more about the podcast at surfcastpodcast.com, or definitely check us out on social media, Facebook, Instagram, at the Surfcast Podcast.